everybody. This is Patti. Welcome to the Witching Hour. Yes, that hour of the day when the veil is thin and magic happens. We have a very special guest for you today. He is the author of the Handbook of Saxon Sorcery and Magic and Walk a Pagan Path and this beautiful new Fortune in Your Hands, a witch's guide to playing card divination and magic. Let us meet Alaric Albertson. Welcome, Alaric. Thank you so much for coming on my show.
Hey, thanks for having me here.
I am thrilled to have you here. And tell me, I'd never done regular playing card divination or anything like that, but I had a roommate years ago. She was German descent, and she could read regular playing cards better than anybody I could read tarot or oracle or anything like that. So tell us a little bit about this and why you do it this way and whatever we need to know.
Yeah, this isn't the only way I do it.
No.
And I think everybody who's had some experience with witchcraft, knows that you generally have more than one technique that you can use. I just felt like I wanted to get this down in writing because I think it's a really valuable and useful way to practice divination and magic, and it's not something you see very much anymore. So I do other things too. I mean, okay, you mentioned Handbook of Saxon Sorcery and Magic. And, this book is all about using runes for divination and magic. More than just runes, but about half the book is devoted to runes, specifically the Old English runes, the Anglo-Saxon runes. But before I was introduced to runes, I didn't hear about runes until the early 80s. So like nearly a decade before that, I was already practicing things, but I was doing divination with like basic, ordinary, everyday playing cards. And there's a reason for that. Playing cards, tarot cards, these all have a long, long history. But as far as what did people really have and what could you actually use? I was actually into paganism for like 2 or 3 years before I ever heard of, I remember thinking that was tarot cards. What are these tarot cards, granted, they've been around since like the 1400s or so, 1500s, something like that. But as far as people really using them in a occult community extensively, especially in the United States, they just weren't used. You couldn't use it. Most people had never heard of them. And even if you had heard of them, where were you going to get these tarot cards? They weren't sold here. They just didn't exist. Tarot became a thing basically when U.S. Games bought the rights to the Rider-Waite deck in, I think it was like 1971.
Wow.
I might be a year or two off, but it's the early 70s, and began to distribute this deck of divination cards, like in every Walden Books, I mean, all the different bookstores in the nation. There weren't that many specific New Age stores then. In fact, I don't think anybody actually said New Age back then. No. But by the late 70s, by the mid to late 70s, everybody had a deck of tarot cards. And now you think that's the only way anybody ever did it. But I can guarantee you in the late 60s, early 70s, people in the United States were not using tarot because they didn't exist. The physical cards were not around. Now, as far as me using them, I've been, like I said, I do other things too. I do runes, I do scrying, I do pendulum. I actually like playing cards more than I like tarot cards. That doesn't mean they're better. What it means is they're better for me. I can see how many people are drawn to them because there's very specific images on each card. You don't really have to know how to read tarot cards to read tarot cards. It's like right there on the card.
There's a picture of lovers. There's a picture of it.
Pretty good idea what that card's how you're supposed to interpret it. And so that makes it, like there's an appeal to that. For me personally, I find that all that detail actually impedes my psychic faculty. I don't want someone else telling me what this card is telling me. I want the card to tell me. And I know that with tarot, good tarot readers, they are doing that. It's an individual sort of thing. Some people don't have problems with all these images. I just find them annoying. I think it's the same reason why I like runes. Runes are kind of similar in that you get a symbol, but the rune itself is a complex mystery. You just get this one little symbol, and then the rune has to speak to you. And so tarot's kind of the same way. Okay, like here you got, I'll just pull out this one, just pull it out. Actually, it's kind of cool if I pull this out because when I'm doing a reading for myself, this card very often means me.
That's beautiful. So it's your card.
Yeah, there's a really complex reason behind that. But for most people, this card will have to do with marriage, with partnerships, with a complete, fulfilling relationship. Because it's the number 7, and 7 when you're reading cards always has to do with completion. And it is the hearts, which always has to do with emotions. So you put those together, and sometimes it's actually called the marriage card because the completion of an emotional thing could be marriage. But does this mean marriage? Not necessarily. Like I said, when I'm doing a reading for me, sometimes the card just means me. Numerologically, my name is a 7, and my birth date is a 7. Okay? And then astrologically, hearts correspond with water, and you cannot put much more water in my horoscope without drowning. Yeah. And when this pops up in my reading, a lot of times when I'm reading for myself, it'll just mean me. But that's, you see how it's an abstract symbol. It can mean different things to different people. And
right. So it probably goes very much with cups in a tarot deck.
Yes, absolutely, because these are the same. I mean, tarot was created from regular playing cards. But basically, it's just playing cards with an extra trump suit added on because rich Italian people in the 1500s wanted to play this cool game called Tarocchi, and they created this new deck with an extra trump suit. Yeah. And actually, Tarocchi, I like a game of Tarocchi. Tarocchi is basically kind of spades, except instead of using spades as your trump, you have a whole extra suit of trump cards. But anyway, that's history stuff, and I know that brings people to tears.
No, it's fascinating. So tell me a little bit, how did you get into how your path? I mean, you've written a lot of other books, magical books and things, and I know you're vice president of things in the board of directors of Heartland Alliance and members of the Druidic organization. Tell us a little bit about your path.
Okay, so my path, basically, if I had to describe my spiritual path, is Anglo-Saxon. It's English, the lost gods of England, pre-Christian gods of England. Magically, though, that's a different sort of thing. To me, magic is a technology. My spirituality does influence my magic, obviously. I think everybody's does. Mm-hmm. But, anybody, any path can work magic. It's not like, oh, if you're the wrong religion, you can't be doing this. Some of those religions may not like you doing it, but as far as can you do it? So I don't limit myself to necessarily Old English forms of magic. It is one thing that drew me to things like runes and wart cunning and things like that. But, I learned playing card divination when I was still searching and trying to find out who I was. And like I said, it works really well for me. Playing card divination is sortilege, basically, which just means divination where you have a finite set of symbols and you draw those symbols, and that is what brings up the prophecy, the prediction. Okay? So there are a lot of different ways you can do this, and each way will have a different a different way of communicating. Think of them as languages. Just like, have you ever been to England?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you know what you're going to know what I'm talking about then. You go to England and they speak this thing called English, and you speak English. And then once in a while, you'll be talking to this nice English gentleman or lady, and all of a sudden, they'll be staring at you like a deer caught in the headlights because they have no idea what you're talking about. Because their English and our English are kind of not the exact same language, you know? And that's kind of what it's like when you're doing different types of divination. When I'm using runes, I'm going to get a certain message, but sometimes that's not the best language to use. And then I can go to playing cards or vice versa. I might start out with playing cards, but oh, no, this isn't the right thing. Uh, in very general terms, I found that runes are better for deeper philosophical questions, things that have to do with me as a person, my personal growth and all, whereas playing cards is a lot more like, should I go to this party tonight or not? Very practical, basic sort of answers. At least that's what I get from them. Somebody else may get the exact opposite. But that's what makes magic so wonderful. It's very intimate and personal.
Very intimate, very personal. So again, I just received this. It's brand new, coming out or out. Do you explain the cards? Fortune expanding. Do you give spreads and things like you would in a tarot deck or an oracle deck? Do you have different kinds of spreads to come up with different things?
Yeah, there's a section in the back after I talk about the cards themselves, some different, basic spreads that you can use. Even though I do explain to people, this your spread, whatever you're using, your spread is basically the context that you're using so that these cards can speak to you. So that can, here's the ones that I like. Here's the ones that I was taught. Here's the ones that work for me. But that doesn't mean you have to stick with those necessarily. If you have something else, like I never do that Celtic cross thing. It just doesn't do a
I
thing for
don't
me.
either. Never, never.
If it's singing to you, then use the thing because none of them are like the right way or the wrong way. They're just ways. And, whatever way is working for you, that is the best way to do it. So I do give some different ways of reading them then. And the purpose of the book, it was hard for me to learn playing cards. But I was taught by friends, I just had to memorize 52 cards. That's really difficult when they don't have little pictures of girls dancing and men with swords in them and stuff like that. Just abstract symbols, and you have to memorize 52 cards. And then over the years, I found that there were different ways. People would have slightly different interpretations of them, sometimes really different interpretations of them. But eventually I noticed there was a pattern. And that's what I tried to put forth in Fortune in Your Hands, is show the pattern, because it's a lot easier to learn these if you realize there's 4 suits and basically 9 numbers, because 10 is basically another version of 1. So you learn those. Now you've got what? You got like 13 things to learn, 4 suits, 9 numbers. That's doable. You learn those and then you put them together. Just hit the 7 and the hearts. You've got completion and emotion. You put those together. You have what is often called the marriage card. So the book does that. I have an introductory chapter that just says, hey, playing cards are cool. You should do this. And then I go right into it, where first we talk about the suits and how they correspond with the 4 elements, and how that relates to their meanings and interpretations. It is important to realize when you get the hearts, it's a heart. Yay, hey, hey. This doesn't necessarily mean romantic love. This could be the love you have for your mother or a grandparent or a child. There's a lot of different. It could be your best friend in a very non-sexual, non-romantic best friend way. It's emotion, but it's not necessarily heart. So we talk about the different suits. And then after I do that, then I go into the numbers. And then I have 4 chapters that are just, here we're going to look at the diamonds, we're going to look at the hearts, we're going to look at, we just go through them. And I give a description of how I interpret the cards. But I do try to make sure that the reader is always aware that if you look at that card and it's saying something totally different to you, listen to the damn card. Because I want everybody to read my book. Everybody, please go out, buy the book. It's a great book. Read the book, but then put down the book and read the cards. Because if you're always going to the book and just listening to what I say about the card, you're not really reading cards. You're reading a book.
Right. That's how I teach as well. I say, read the book, know the book, and then put down the book.
Yeah. And go back to the book if you need to, if you need to refer to it. But mostly it's the cards are supposed to talk to you. And then after that, as you had mentioned, it's like then we go on to here's how to do different readings. And here's how to lay out cards for this. And I even go into things that often don't get an extensive treatment. I have an entire chapter on the ethics of divination, which I think is an important topic to address. And actually, I just recently found out Llewellyn's annual The Witch's Companion, I think for 2025, I have to rewrite it because they don't want it to look like a chapter in a book. But that chapter on ethics, the editor of that annual publication has asked me to have that as an article in the next.
Beautiful, because I think that is so important in divination, in readings, what people do, how important ethics is within it. So what is your thoughts on that? Not to give us the whole chapter, but what do people get wrong? What is something that's really important?
There are some really slimy people out there who don't care about the ethics, and they're going to, but I do think it's possible, it's really easy to step over the border, to do something that's not really ethical without being malicious, but it still can cause hurt. It's important when you're reading, if you're reading for somebody, if you're reading for yourself, who cares? But if you're reading for somebody else, it's important to realize your words have power. You're not just showing them what you're seeing. You are partly kind of making their future here, because everything you say is going to influence their destiny in some way. And I don't think people always get that.
Yeah.
And I know from personal experience, this is the one, you get a lot of bonus things for being old, but one thing is you get the experience, and one thing I have seen over the years is where bad things have happened that good people have done. I use an example in the book. A friend of mine who had recently gotten married, well, both the husband and wife were friends, but I'm thinking specifically about the bride in this context. Another friend of ours who was a tarot reader and was actually pretty good and did kind of not full-time, but part-time professional reading for other people. She had just done a little reading on her own, and she went to the bride and said, "Oh my God, your marriage is going to be on the rocks. It's not going to succeed." And she wasn't doing it to be mean. She was doing it because she actually saw that and felt like that was going to happen and felt like she needed to tell her friend. And, as a matter of fact, she is right. The marriage did end like about 2 years later. But first of all, there's part of me that's always, would it have happened necessarily if she hadn't had that planted, if that seed hadn't been planted? And we'll never know. Now, here's the other thing where a lot of hurt comes in. Do you think the bride was happy about this? Do you think she was like, "Oh, thank you so much"? No. Those two women were no longer friends. A whole friendship, a nice friendship that had been going on for years, down the drain right there. So you have to watch what you say. And that's kind of an extreme example, but it's so easy.
But a good example. I agree wholeheartedly, because that self-fulfilling prophecy, this isn't going to work. The second you're walking down the aisle, this isn't going to work. You're going to live into it.
Yes.
I always say my witch and magical practitioner spellcaster side trumps my psychic side.
Yeah.
Like I would say to something like that, you might have some issues. Like somebody when I was a little kid said, and all came true. You're going to have health issues. You're going to have, oh yeah, 3 husbands, blah, blah, blah. I am on husband number 3. But had I done that reading now, I would look back going, there's a possibility you could have 3 husbands, but you could maybe avoid the first 2 if you don't marry your daddy. That kind of a thing. If you don't,
Yeah, yeah,
it,
absolutely. And
always
that's
comes.
like
Thank
also,
you for
it
saying that.
implies when you tell people definite things like that, it implies that they have no choice.
Yeah, we have
You
choice.
know, yeah, it's just not true. It's like you don't necessarily know what's going to happen. You can look and you can see what the tendencies are, where things are leading. If nothing changes, this is where I see this leading, but that doesn't mean that's going to happen. And honestly, there's another chapter in this book too, because I feel like that's really the cool thing about playing cards too. And you can do the same thing with tarot, honestly. It's like I have a whole chapter on how to cast a spell with the cards. In other words, if you pull those cards and you don't like what they say, are you just going to say, oh, well, my life's gone to crap? No, I'm just not going to do that. Then you take those cards and you make the life you want to make. Because if you're a witch, you don't accept destiny, you make destiny.
Yes. I love that. You guys have got to get this book, Fortune in Your Hands, because everybody's got a deck of playing cards somewhere. Show us your cards. You have some really cool cards because you showed me.
Yeah. My friend, Win Willow, she's this wonderful woman, and she's one of my best friends here in Dubuque. She gave me some cards, a deck of cards, because she knew I was going to have a book of playing cards coming out. And so I opened it up. It's like, oh, look, you gave me some cards. Isn't that nice? And I'm thinking, why did you give me a deck of cards? It's not like these are really rare. And then I looked at the back of them, and she had these cards custom made, where the back of each card is the cover of my book, which
That is
if
beautiful.
wonders why I love this woman so much. Sure, there you go.
That is the most clever and beautiful gift. So I love that. And I love that you put spell working to it again, because we as witches do not take destiny. We make destiny. We take fate into our own hands and change things. So I love that about you. So tell us a little bit about your other books. Since now we're all going to be intrigued with you.
Well, okay, let's see my other news.
What you have with you.
My book, Travels to Middle Earth. You're asking what my path was, and I said it's Old English, it's Anglo-Saxon. And that was kind of what my first book was about, because there's very little about Old English spirituality out there. And that was published in like 2009. It is for a very specific audience. I think it's good for anyone. Anyone who's brand new to paganism, you're going to get something out of this. But it's about Anglo-Saxon paganism, so it does have a certain focus. I say in the book, if it turns out that the Greek gods are calling you, go with it. Woden's not going to have a big old fit because you went over here. But this was the focus for the book, and it did well for a while. But it was published by Llewellyn, and you have to have a high number of books coming for it to stay in publication with Llewellyn, just because they have so much going on. So it got taken out of, it went out of print. And almost immediately, Cross Crow Books in Chicago contacted me. They're a smaller publisher, even though they're awesome. And I highly recommend Cross Crow Books to readers and writers alike. They contacted me and asked if they could, reprint it, do a new edition. And so Llewellyn gave me the rights back, and I then sold the rights to Cross Crow. And they did it, and I love it. It came out 2 years ago, and it has a new cover that Wick Malloway designed for me. I am so in love with this cover. Kevin Brown does my Llewellyn covers, and I pretty much have an author's crush on him. He does such great work. But I absolutely loved this. And one reason was Wick sent me like half a dozen little like sketches of ideas he had for the cover. And that night, our local community was having one of our community meetups. So I just took all those with me and I said, hey guys, what do you like? And people liked, well, some people liked the two ravens in one of the pictures, and somebody else liked Woden in one of the pictures. But Woden had pants on that made him look kind of gangly legged, and they didn't like that. They thought he should be in a robe. I took all the comments and sent them to Wick, and he came out with this synthesis that was like, so I absolutely love the cover. Anyway, Travis Middle Earth is about Anglo-Saxon paganism. It's a book I'm very proud of. Nothing makes me happier than when a reader from England, and this happens surprisingly often, I'll have someone in England send me an email or contact me through Facebook or something, but get in touch with me and thank me for writing this because, to paraphrase, but it's always the same message. My ancestors are Anglo-Saxons, and all I ever see is Celtic, Celtic, Celtic. Yeah, so it was just kind of, that just makes me feel good that I'm helping people reconnect with who they are.
That is beautiful.
Yeah. So after I wrote that, then I went on to write what I consider my magic book, which is the Handbook of Saxon Sorcery and Magic. At the time, it had a different title. It was called Weird Working, but Weird Working wasn't selling enough, and
people don't know what it means. I mean,
yeah, basically, and there were people at Llewellyn who said this book should be selling. It's really good. It should be selling better than it is. So they asked me if they could change the title, and so of course you can change the title. It's not like I'm married to the title. So I'm very proud of this one. If you're into rune magic at all or runes at all, this is a very good book. It's different from a lot of rune books because I actually sat down and talked to people what they used for magic and why. And one thing I got from people over and over and over again, they said, when I do runes, I'm fine when I have the book, but I put the book down and I just see these weird symbols and I don't. So I wrote the book a lot different than most rune books. In this book, they're not presented in alphabetical order. They're presented in kind of like conceptual groupings. Like all the trees are presented together. So, because face it, a lot of people out there, I shouldn't say most because I haven't done a survey, but a lot of people out there, they grew up in cities. You tell them this rune means this tree and this tree and this tree. And they're just hearing tree, they don't really make that distinction so much. Putting them all together, you see the difference between these runes, And then I have all the animal runes. I just have them grouped differently. And then I also explain why each rune, what the character is supposed to show. Because these aren't just weird abstract scribbles. Somebody just didn't go, oh, let's call that such and such. I mean, they are little drawings of things. Mm-hmm. And after you look at it, it's one of those things where you don't necessarily see it until I discuss it, and then now you can't unsee it.
Right.
So it's a very good book for runes. And then also it covers other things, work cunning, which is the use of herbs and magic. And the first half of the book is runes. The second half of the book is other magic techniques and covers other things that are non-runes, but kind of Old English in origin. So I love this book. To me, this is a book I'm more proud of. This is my great work.
That is great. So you guys check it out. And before we end, I'm going to have you tell everybody where they can find you, where they can find everything. But before we go, you said you've been in this path a long time. How did you discover your path? Were you born into this?
Oh, no, absolutely not. No. I mean, there were things in my history. I know my grandfather had a big influence on me. I was fishing as soon as I could walk. I was still a toddler, and I was out in a fishing boat with him. And he would take me out on this little oxbow lake in Arkansas called Old River. And we'd spend like the night there, like long periods of time on this lake fishing. And while we were there, just me and him, he would talk to me. Now, I know he was not trying to make me pagan. I know this. He was like this big dude in the church. I forget what it's called. It's not a minister, but it's not a regular person. It was like one of the ministers, helper people.
Right.
And um, a deacon, that's what it was. He was a, is that a word?
Deacon.
Deacon. Okay, he was a deacon in the church. Um, but he would talk to me about Mother Nature, and he spoke of her as like a sentient being and all. And I know that really was my first introduction to the Earth Mother. So there were things like that, but no, this was not. I just lucked into. I made the mistake of reading the Bible in 1969, and I was kind of horrified because up until then I was very gung ho myself in Christianity, but I had just been spoon fed everything, and I'm reading this book that's telling a whole different story from this so-called loving God I was supposed to have, and it was horrible. It was just horrific, some of the things that are going on in this book. And unfortunately, I'm gay, and that's actually important in this story here because that was the kicker, was I couldn't talk to anybody about it. It's 1969, I couldn't talk to my parents or my grandparents or my minister. There was nobody I could talk to it because Leviticus was telling me that God wanted me dead, and stoned to death. So I went for like several years then trying to find something, a couple of years. And it was early in 1971 where I stumbled across witchcraft and met a few people who were into that. And it wasn't cool then. It wasn't like, hey, I'm Wiccan, So I was a little bit resistant because I didn't want to tattoo a big L on my forehead, And, but then it was the right place. It was where I needed to go. And I think that really, that really got my life going in a good, positive way.
And nobody wants to stone you. Well, I mean, people probably still do, but nobody in our community.
But it isn't. But my gods don't want to stone me. That's
God's
if who wants to stone me, we can have a good old fight.
Yeah.
But when God Himself wants to stone you and have you dead, it's like, okay, I haven't even done. And I knew it's like I hadn't even done anything yet. But that was only because I was only 15 and hadn't figured out how to go about it. So that was kind of what. That wasn't what made me pagan, but that's what got me sick.
Led you there. Yeah. I was not raised with religion because my grandfather was this big atheist, humanist, society, philosophical leader. But I tried everything, and it was the one that just fit for me too. Same things. That didn't work. That didn't work. So that's beautiful.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like I looked at a lot of different things. I mean, I even read the Book of Mormon, which that's like the Bible on acid. Just like, with all due respect, I mean, I've had Mormon friends, so I know it is something that appeals to some people. But I looked at a lot of different concepts, a lot of different ways, Eastern religions and things like that. And it wasn't until I found Western European witchcraft that I really found a place where I felt like I fit.
Good. I'm actually just coming up because I'm doing a tour of the weird and worms in the UK. I'm going to be going all around all sorts of places. I'm very excited. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, before we go, this is fascinating. Tell us where people can find you, where people can find your books, the new one, the old one, the new redone one. How can people now follow you?
Well, they can try to follow me on Facebook if Meta doesn't shut me down again, which they do periodically.
Me too. I've been hacked since February.
Okay, so I'm back on though. So look for Alaric Albertson. I am currently on Facebook. I lost like 3,000 friends the last time they did this to me, so I need more friends. I also have a Discord channel, Alaric Albertson. I try to keep things simple. I'm going to call it Alaric Albertson if I possibly can, because that gives you one thing to go to. So I also have a Discord channel. I'm really new to Discord, so bear with me because I don't really know how it works. And then as far as my books, you can order them. Well, okay, not all of them because Llewellyn doesn't carry this one. This Travis to Middle Earth you can get from Cross Crow Books. Okay, all my other books you can get from Llewellyn. Don't get them from Amazon. I know it's really tempting, but yeah. Um, Ideally, if you want to make me very, very happy, go to your local bookstore and ask them to order it for you. I might get a kickback. They may order several copies, and now I'm in another bookstore. But more importantly than that, go to your local New Age bookstore and ask them to order it. Support your local New Age bookstore. These places are like the part of the lifeblood of our society now, of the magical society. If we didn't have those, I'm old enough. This is again, old guy. I can remember when we didn't have anything like that. And these shops, Aquarius in Kansas City, Malloway Brothers in Chicago. I mean, there's every city of any size, Pathways in St. Louis. These shops are so important to our culture. It's a place where we can come together. They are usually very supportive of the community, and they need our help. They're not charities. They need an income. So order from the bookstores, please.
Yes. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. All these little mom and pop, little brick and mortar stores along the way, a lot of them didn't survive the pandemic very well
Yes.
versus the machine. So, oh my God, Alaric, you are a delightful. Thank you. Go to Facebook and find him, buy his books, all of his books. I can't wait to really sit down with this with a deck of cards, regular playing cards. Again, and if I don't like what I get, I'm going to do a spell to get something different because I'm a witch. Any last words you have for anybody before we go?
I don't think so. I think we're good.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for bringing your beautiful magic to the witching hour.